there are stories whispered by the sea, stories so deep, so wrapped in mystery, that they feel almost alive. Tonight, we begin with one of them. Imagine the ocean at its calmest, the surface smooth as black glass, the sky hanging above like a dim lantern, and somewhere far beneath, a silent tale waiting to rise. But don't worry, this version won't startle you or pull you into panic. No crashing waves, no dramatic alarms, just a soft, glowing thread of curiosity inviting you closer. Because this is the tale of a vessel powerful enough to challenge the deep, elegant enough to glide like a shadow, and mysterious enough to capture the imagination of generations. The USS Thresher, a submarine whose story unfolds not with thunder, but with a gentle, mesmerizing pull. The kind that makes you lean in, settle down, and drift with the narrative. Before you follow the current, take a slow breath. Let your thoughts loosen their grip. Allow yourself to drift, mentally, emotionally, maybe even a little physically, as we sink softly into a moment suspended between calm curiosity and a quiet pulse of awe. You're safe here. Think of this as a nightlight made of words. And now, let's wander deeper. To understand the story of the Thresher, we must first ease ourselves into the world she belonged to, a world where metal meets mystery, where sailors live in narrow hallways filled with laughter and coffee, and where the ocean holds more secrets than any library on land. But don't picture chaos or tension. Picture something gentler, like slipping slowly into warm water, each inch of depth bringing a quieter, calmer atmosphere. The late 1950s and early 1960s were a time of great innovation. People were building things that made the world raise its eyebrows and whisper, "Are we really doing this?" Cars sprouted fins, rockets reached upward, radios hummed with music that refused to sit still. And beneath all this surface-level excitement, engineers and sailors were dreaming of a new kind of submarine, sleek, powerful, and quiet enough to make the sea itself wonder who just slipped by. Enter the USS Thresher, a vessel forged from steel, shaped by ambition, and polished with the kind of enthusiasm only large machinery and determined engineers can generate. She was designed to move gracefully through the deep, not like a lumbering giant, but like a practiced dancer, smooth, precise, and possibly with better posture than most of us. Her creators envisioned a submarine that could dive deeper, glide quieter, and withstand pressures that would make a soda can rethink its life choices. And as she emerged from the shipyard, gleaming under the morning sun, there was an unmistakable sense of pride in the air. Not dramatic pride, more like the gentle, satisfied smile of someone who's just finished assembling a very complicated piece of furniture and only had 3 screws left over. Life aboard her would soon become its own kind of rhythm. Imagine dim hallways filled with the hum of machinery, steady, even hypnotic. Bunks stacked neatly like metallic bunk beds, each with a curtain that promised privacy, even though everyone knew it was mostly symbolic. The warm scent of meals drifting from the galley, the occasional joke whispered between shipmates, the familiar clink of tools against metal panels, a floating village of 129 souls, each one essential, each one contributing to a harmony that held the submarine together just as firmly as her bolts and welds. Down in the depths, where sunlight fades into memory, the Thresher moved with a confidence that felt almost serene. The ocean around her wasn't hostile, It was ancient, quiet, contemplative, a world of drifting shadows and soft pressure, a world where sound travels differently, thoughts feel slower, and everything seems just a little more profound. If the sea could think, perhaps it would have regarded the Thresher as a polite visitor, moving with respect through its timeless chambers. But beyond the machinery, beyond the missions and maneuvers, the Thresher held something deeply human, a sense of purpose, a sense of exploration, a sense of standing at the edge of the known world and gently, so gently leaning forward.
That is where our journey truly begins. Not in noise or chaos, not in tension or fear, but in calm dedication, in steel crafted with care, in hands steady with training, in hearts steady with unity, in the gentle hum of a vessel ready to meet the deep.
So as we begin this voyage through history, half fact, half feeling, let your thoughts drift like slow currents. Let the quiet settle in around you. Let your mind glide through the story the way the Thresher once glided through the ocean, smoothly, calmly, gracefully. We are not here to rush. We are not here to fear. We are here to explore a memory wrapped in water, held by time, and told in whispers. And this is where the ocean begins to speak. When steel learned to breathe underwater. If you're comfortable, let your shoulders soften for a moment. Breathe in calmly, and let us drift back to a time when the world was buzzing with ideas, inventions, and hair gel strong enough to survive a hurricane. The late 1950s into the early 1960s, an era of polished shoes, polished ambitions, and polished metal that would eventually take the shape of one of the most remarkable submarines ever built, the USS Thresher. Now don't worry, this isn't a history class with squeaky chalkboards and surprise quizzes. This is the soft glow candlelight version of history, the one where complicated things become gentle waves in your mind, the kind you can float on without sinking into stress. So let's step quietly into 1958. The world was changing fast in those years. Radios hummed in living rooms, televisions flickered black and white dreams, and scientists carried coffee-stained blueprints everywhere like proud new parents. In this whirlwind of imagination, the United States Navy envisioned something bold, a submarine so advanced, so whisper quiet, and so capable of deep-sea exploration that even the ocean itself might blink in surprise. Enter the concept that eventually became the USS Thresher. Not just a machine, not just steel and rivets, but a symbol of how far engineering and human ambition could reach when pointed toward the horizon and dipped gently underwater. Yes, gently, because even massive steel submarines deserve gentle entrances in a sleep version story. Imagine a bustling shipyard in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, sparks flying, metal singing under the touch of welding torches, engineers murmuring to each other in that mysterious language of millimeters, pressure tolerances, and yes, I'm sure that bolt belongs there. Inside that symphony of creation, the USS Thresher began to take shape. Her hull was crafted from high-strength steel, the kind of metal that doesn't flinch even when oceans press against it with ancient weight. She was designed to slip deeper underwater than previous submarines, like a sleek silver arrow, diving into a world of quiet blue. And her nuclear propulsion? Think of it as a miniature sun humming peacefully inside her, providing energy not in loud combustion bursts, but in a deep, steady whisper. The kind of whisper that could take her thousands of miles without needing to surface for air, which, honestly, is more commitment than most of us show, climbing a flight of stairs. But every part of Thresher wasn't just strong. It was carefully, lovingly crafted. A sonar system so advanced it could almost hear your heartbeat from across the ocean. A streamlined design that allowed her to glide like a shadow through water. Interior systems arranged with logic, precision, and probably a few muttered prayers from engineers hoping everything stayed where it belonged. Yet even with all the technical brilliance, there was something oddly poetic about her creation, a blend of human imagination and cold steel coming together in harmony, preparing to dance with the deep. And in the softest, least militaristic way possible, let's acknowledge this. The Thresher was built during a time when nations were racing for technological greatness. Every invention felt like a statement, but the Thresher wasn't about confrontation. She represented advancement, proof of what humans could create when they dared to reimagine the world beneath the waves. She embodied exploration, innovation, discovery, and honestly, if submarines had their own red carpet events, Thresher would have shown up gleaming, camera-ready, with her hull polished like she was about to win Best Underwater Performance by a nuclear vessel. Still, building the Thresher involved more than impressive machinery. It involved people, hundreds of hands guided by intention and care. Men and women who traced every bolt, every gasket, every panel with meticulous dedication. Even the smallest component mattered, because they knew where this vessel was headed, into depths humans could hardly imagine. In the shipyard, workers would sometimes pause to simply admire the shape forming before them, not out of pride alone, but out of the quiet recognition that something extraordinary was taking form, a machine that could disappear into the deepest blues of the ocean and return with stories only the sea could tell. By the time 1960 arrived, the Thresher was no longer an idea. She was a presence, a sleek, powerful silhouette resting patiently on her cradle, waiting for the moment she would meet the water. And so let's move gently to July 1960, the day the Thresher made her first descent, not into the deep, but into the surface world of waves and wind and sunlight. Picture this moment in slow motion. The massive submarine gleaming under the daylight edges toward the sea. People gather, some squinting in the sun, others holding breath without realizing it. The air feels a little electric, not with danger, but with hope. A kind of collective inhale from everyone present, as though the entire shipyard were leaning slightly forward. And then she touches the water. Not with a crash, not with drama, but with a smooth, effortless glide, as if the ocean had been waiting for her, arms open. The steel giant, carefully assembled piece by piece, finally becomes what she was meant to be. A vessel of depths, a traveler of silence. There's something incredibly calming about imagining it. The way she settles, almost sighing into place. The ripples stretching across the surface like gentle applause. The breeze brushing past, whispering, "All right then, let's see what you can do." This moment wasn't loud or explosive, it was serene. A ceremony of metal meeting water, of vision becoming reality. Even in a busy shipyard filled with machinery and human chatter, the energy felt soft,
meaningful, almost tender. If submarines had hearts, this would have been the moment hers began to beat. From that day on, the Thresher wasn't just a vessel. She was a promise, a dream made tangible, a whisper of the future launched into the ocean. She symbolized humanity's desire to go deeper, not only into the sea, but into the unknown corners of understanding and capability. She was born of steel, yes, but she carried something far softer within her story. Human hope. Hope crafted into hull plates. Hope welded into seams. Hope threaded through wiring and valves. Hope rising with every ripple she created. And much like all great dreams, she carried a sense of wonder, one you can still feel when you listen closely enough. Like tonight. Now that we've gently wandered through the birth of the USS Thresher, her era, her creation, her launch, let the imagery settle inside you, like soft sediment sinking to the ocean floor. Feel how peaceful it becomes, how steady, how quietly beautiful. Soon, we'll follow her into the deeper chapters of her journey. But for now, stay adrift in this moment where steel first met water and a new story began beneath the waves. Life in the quiet belly of the sea. Life aboard the USS Thresher was unlike anything that existed on land. It wasn't the kind of life filled with wide-open horizons, wind in your hair, or long walks under the sun. No birds circling overhead, no sunsets melting into the ocean, no sudden rainstorms that force everyone to run inside. Instead, it was a world of steel, soft, humming vibrations, quietly ticking gauges, and a kind of closeness that only 129 souls could know when they shared a single vessel, one that slipped beneath the waves like a silent thought. Imagine waking up every day inside a long metal cocoon, narrow, dimly lit, filled with the warm scent of machinery, coffee, and the very faint aroma of someone cooked eggs here 2 hours ago. It wasn't glamorous, but strangely enough, it felt like home. A home that carried you through miles of shifting water, far away from the surface world. A home where footsteps echoed softly down narrow passageways, and where every sound, no matter how small, felt like part of a shared heartbeat. The rhythm aboard the Thresher was its own kind of music, a sleep-conducive soundtrack, if you will. Steady hums, low rumbles, gentle mechanical sighs. The sort of environment that, if you weren't on duty, could lull you into the best nap of your life. And trust me, the sailors learned quickly. If the ocean wanted to sing them to sleep with low-frequency lullabies, resisting was futile. These 129 sailors weren't just a crew. They were a community woven together by routine, respect, and the occasional inside joke whispered over midnight coffee. In the confined hallways of a submarine, humor becomes a survival tool, and sometimes the only thing keeping everyone from taking life too seriously. Someone always knew how to mimic the ship's sonar ping for a laugh. Someone else would tape googly eyes onto a piece of machinery because even the oxygen purifier deserved personality. And another would swear that the submarine had moods, some days cooperative, some days cranky, and some days refusing to go left. Whether or not that was true didn't matter. What mattered was that everyone pretended it might be. Inside this floating iron corridor, people learned to move in synchronized patterns. Two sailors passing each other didn't walk. They shifted sideways like polite crabs. Someone climbing into a bunk did so with the grace of a sleepy acrobat, careful not to kick the person below. Privacy wasn't a luxury. It was more like a fond memory. But solidarity? That was abundant. There's something oddly comforting about knowing the person 2 feet away from you understands your entire world without needing a single explanation.
When the submarine slipped into deeper waters, the space around them, outside the hull, became vast in a way the human mind couldn't quite comprehend. Oceans are huge, almost unimaginably so, but aboard the Thresher, that enormity didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt nurturing, like being wrapped inside an ancient, enormous blanket of blue. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. Above, the surface roared with weather and wind. Down below, everything softened. One sailor once described it as living inside the world's coziest thunderstorm, except the thunder never comes. And he was right. There was a sense of being protected, sheltered in the quiet belly of the ocean. The hull was their barrier and their sanctuary, separating them from the weight of the water and creating a pocket of calm. Every moment felt suspended, like time itself slowed down underwater, taking long, deep breaths. Inside that calm, conversations found their own rhythm. Some were philosophical, late-night musings about stars they couldn't see but still remembered. Some were nostalgic, stories about childhood lakes, hometown diners, or dogs that definitely missed their owners more than the owners missed them. And some conversations were blissfully mundane, debates over the best instant coffee brand, arguments about whether socks should be folded or rolled, and personal opinions about the ideal power nap length. The unofficial consensus, just long enough to wake up confused. Meals aboard the Thresher were more than food. They were small daily celebrations, no linen tablecloths, no fancy cutlery, but plenty of shared warmth. Laughter clinked as loudly as utensils. Someone would complain gently about the powdered potatoes. Another would proudly announce they'd learned to make the perfect submarine sandwich, literally a sandwich made on a submarine. And someone else would suggest, only half joking, that the crew deserved a Michelin star for eating gracefully in tight spaces. You try not spilling soup when the floor tilts unexpectedly. It takes skill. Sleeping quarters were another adventure entirely. Bunks stacked 3 high. Mattresses surprisingly soft for something located inside a metal cylinder drifting through the deep. Every bed had a privacy curtain, though, let's be honest. The curtains were thin enough for shadows to dance through, but thick enough to make you feel like you had your own cave. And as you drifted off, you could hear the faint shift of water outside, like the ocean whispering bedtime stories no human words could replicate. And oh, the dreams these sailors had. Dreams of land, of families, of skies they hadn't seen for weeks. Dreams of sunlight that felt unreal because their days were lit with warm bulbs instead of morning rays. Dreams that blurred into reality because the boundary between waking and sleeping in a submarine was so thin, so gentle, so fluid. What made this life beautiful was the quiet unity. 129 individuals, each with their own fears, hopes, habits, and quirks, but all sharing the same steel womb beneath the waves. They breathed the same recycled air, trusted the same instruments, followed the same routines, and drifted through the same silent world that stretched endlessly in every direction. There was a certain magic in their bond with the sea. Even though they couldn't open a window for very obvious reasons, they felt connected to the vast underwater world surrounding them. The ocean wasn't an enemy, it was a companion, a steady presence that hummed gently against the hull. Sometimes sailors pressed a hand to the cool metal wall and imagined themselves touching the water itself, feeling the pulse of something timeless. In the quiet moments when the submarine settled into its steady glide, there was a sense of serenity no land-based life could replicate, a sense that time didn't matter, that noise was optional, that existence itself had softened around them. Wrapped in dim lights and the hum of machinery, the Thresher felt like a drifting constellation, one that carried its own tiny galaxy of human stories through the deep. Even duty shifts had a meditative quality. Watchstanders monitored glowing panels and dials with calm focus, their breaths syncing with the mechanical rhythm around them. Navigation officers traced imagined paths through dark water, maps unfolding like whispered secrets. Engineering teams checked gauges with quiet precision, each gesture deliberate and composed. Nothing felt rushed. Everything flowed. And though the submarine was undeniably cramped, the closeness fostered warmth. The crew became a tapestry, threads woven so tightly you couldn't pull one without feeling the rest. They teased each other, supported each other, worked beside each other, and rested beneath the same humming ceiling. Every laugh, every story, every shared moment contributed to a sense of belonging that rarely exists anywhere else. Living underwater might sound isolating, but aboard the Thresher, it was the opposite. It was connection layered upon connection day after day, until the submarine itself felt alive with memory. The long corridors remembered footsteps. The mess hall remembered laughter. The bunks remembered dreams. And the ocean remembered everything, holding their journey in the stillness of the deep. Inside that stillness, the Thresher crew discovered something profound. When the world grows small and the sea grows infinite, the human heart becomes incredibly tender. Bonds strengthen, quiet becomes comforting, and life, even squeezed into narrow hallways and shared bunks, becomes full of presence, of purpose, of small joys found in unexpected corners. So imagine yourself now drifting through that space, the warm hum beneath your feet, the gentle lights overhead, the soft rustle of uniforms and blankets, the quiet camaraderie flowing like calm water. This was life aboard the Thresher. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply, beautifully human. A gentle existence, wrapped in steel, carried by the sea. And in this peaceful world, beneath the waves, each sailor found a rhythm, steady as breathing, soft as a lullaby, and warm as the bonds they shared. The morning the sea waited. Morning arrived quietly on April 9th, 1963, the way soft mornings often do, unhurried, brushing its first hints of light across the ocean like a painter testing new colors. The surface of the Atlantic stretched out in every direction, calm and composed, as though it had rehearsed overnight for the role of mysteriously peaceful body of water. Gentle swells rolled beneath a pale sky, and the breeze carried that cool, salty scent. Only early morning oceans seemed to understand. Above this serene stage floated the USS Skylark, a sturdy support vessel whose most important job that day was simply to listen. She waited patiently, rocking in rhythm with the waves, keeping her ears tuned to the deep where her silent partner, the USS Thresher,
prepared for a test dive. Skylark wasn't a glamorous ship, but she had a reliable presence, like the friend who sits beside you during a long movie and whispers, "Don't worry, I'm here if you need popcorn." Her task was not to command, but to accompany, and she accepted that role with steadfast calm. Below the surface, though still close enough to feel the last glimmers of daylight, the USS Thresher hovered like a shadow, preparing for a slow, elegant descent. Inside her steel walls, the crew moved with practiced ease. Voices were quiet, footsteps muted, and everything felt wrapped in a shared sense of focus. The kind of focus that isn't tense, but attentive. A calm alertness, like when you're tying your shoelaces before a peaceful morning walk. You know what you're doing, and you know it's going to be fine. Even without windows to see the sky, the crew could sense it. That special stillness the ocean wears when it wakes up. A softness in the pressure, a hush in the vibrations, a kind of underwater dawn. The Thresher herself seemed to feel it too, humming contentedly as if stretching in preparation for the journey ahead. The dive test was routine, another step in understanding how gracefully the submarine could navigate deeper waters. If the ocean was a layered world, today was simply about visiting the next floor down. Everything began with the most subtle shift. A gentle downward angle, a quiet adjustment of ballast, a smooth breath from the vessel's inner systems, and then, like a leaf deciding to drift toward a pond's floor, the Thresher began her descent, 200 meters, a depth where sunlight still whispers faintly, though it's beginning to lose interest. Inside the boat, the mood remained peaceful. Instruments glowed softly. Metal surfaces reflected the dim lights with a warm sheen. The graceful hum of the reactor felt like a lullaby wrapped in engineering. Communication between Thresher and Skylark came through steady, rhythmic transmissions, simple confirmations, calm reports, a dance of signals between two companions, one above, one below, both performing their roles without hurry, without anxiety. Above, Skylark bobbed gently, listening. Below, Thresher sank deeper, serene as a descending feather. The crew had been through many exercises before, yet something about this morning felt unusually tranquil. Maybe it was the posture of the ocean, flat and friendly. Maybe the cool air drifting through Skylark's decks. Or maybe it was simply that the Thresher, on this quiet April morning, moved with such liquid smoothness that it made even the seasoned sailors feel as though they were passengers inside a giant floating breath. The descent continued. 300 meters. Here the sunlight faded almost completely, replaced by a velvety blue darkness that wrapped itself around the submarine like a calm embrace. And strangely, this darkness wasn't unsettling. It was comforting, like a room lit by a single warm lamp. Late at night, the crew settled into their stations, exchanging soft nods, sharing gentle reminders, pulling tiny smiles at familiar routines. The deeper they went, the more peaceful everything felt. The water outside grew heavier, yes, but the inside grew lighter, mentally, emotionally, as though the ocean's pressure created an equal and opposite sense of serenity among the sailors, a balancing act only the sea could perform. Thresher glided downward with a kind of confidence that came from hundreds of hours of training and preparation. Every system felt aligned. Every movement felt intentional. Even the temperature inside the submarine held a comfortable steadiness, a subtle warmth, contrasting beautifully with the cool silence outside. Above, Skylark maintained her watchful role,
She floated like a guardian cloud, catching every message the Thresher sent upward. The crew aboard Skylark stood ready, calm but attentive, sipping their morning coffee with the gentle awareness that today was a day of precision, not danger, a day of careful observation, not alarm, a day of simple descent, not drama. 400 meters. Another soft announcement passed between submarine and surface. No urgency, no tension, just a gentle continuation of the underwater journey. The Thresher behaved beautifully, descending with the grace of a creature born to swim in deep blue silences. Inside, the hum of the engines blended with the rhythm of breathing. Some sailors, off duty for the moment, leaned against the cool metal walls and listened to the ocean's muffled whispers. Others adjusted controls with the light touch of musicians tuning instruments. Everything felt slow, intentional, almost meditative. The deeper the Thresher went, the more it felt like the sea was absorbing the noise of the world above, smoothing it out, softening it, turning it into something peaceful. The submarine became a drifting bubble of human presence in a vast, quiet universe. But the quiet wasn't empty. It was rich, full, softly textured, like thick velvet draped across a grand hall. The communication cable between Thresher and Skylark stretched like an invisible thread, connecting two worlds, the silent deep and the sunlit surface. Each signal was a reminder that the ocean, though immense, was not a separator, but a connector that morning, holding both vessels in a gentle cradle of calm. Downward they continued, with no rush, no force, only ease. The sailors went through their routine checks with steady hands, practiced movements, and whispered confirmations. The navigation team monitored depth with serene concentration. The engineering crew listened to every vibration with the intuition of people who knew their vessel like a trusted friend. Even the submarine itself seemed perfectly content, moving with the serenity of a whale gliding into deeper waters. Outside the hull, the sea darkened further, shifting from blue to indigo to near black. But inside, the warm lights kept everything soft and golden. A world within a world, a breath within a breath. If someone had pressed their ear to the metal, they might have imagined they heard the ocean murmuring ancient lullabies, songs older than ships, older than sailors, older than stories, songs that felt less like music and more like a reminder that the sea was patient, timeless, and vast beyond imagination. But for now, for this moment, the sea was simply peaceful, welcoming, a quiet host. And the Thresher drifted downward through that calm, step by gentle step, into the waiting blue below. The descent continued with a kind of quiet elegance that only the deep ocean could choreograph. Every meter downward felt like entering another layer of stillness, soft, heavy, yet strangely comforting. The USS Thresher slipped further beneath the waves like a sigh drifting downward, unhurried and unbothered, as though the sea itself had parted gently to make room for her. Inside, the crew felt the deepening hush wrap around them like a warm blanket. Pressure increased outside, yes, but the atmosphere within grew softer, steadier, a pocket of human warmth, moving through an ancient world of blue silence. Every sound became slightly more intimate. Footsteps carried a muted echo. Voices became lower, quieter, as if everyone instinctively knew the ocean was listening and wished not to disturb it. On the surface, the Skylark continued its gentle rocking, rising and falling with the morning swells. Her crew watched the horizon, listened to the comms, and felt that curious mixture of calm and purpose that comes from supporting a vessel traveling where the human eye cannot reach. The connection between the two ships, one above, one below, felt like a held breath, a quiet conversation shared between friends across different worlds. Below, the Thresher passed deeper still. 500 meters. This was a world where sunlight no longer visited. The darkness wasn't frightening, just serene. It enveloped the submarine with velvet softness, like a quiet room prepared for meditation. If you imagined reaching out through the hull, you'd picture your fingertips pressing into cool, endless shadow, the kind of darkness that feels ancient and wise. Inside, instruments glowed like constellations stitched across the control panels. The soft amber lights reflected on the sailors' faces, giving them a dreamy calm, as if they were traveling not just downward, but inward, toward a deeper part of themselves. The Thresher's hum became the day's lullaby, steady and soothing. Some crew members, when off duty for a moment, would steal a quiet second to lean against the hull and simply listen. Not for problems, not for alarms, just for the soft, resonant murmur of a world that had existed long before them and would continue long after. The ocean's voice was subtle, a faint pressure, a low vibration, but it had a way of reminding the sailors they were guests in a vast cathedral carved by nature. At 600 meters, conversations aboard the submarine grew even softer, as though each man felt the sacredness of the depth surrounding them. The crew spoke in calm tones, steady and unhurried. The officers moved with deliberate precision, checking systems with gentle touches. Every action was smooth, measured, almost graceful, like the deliberate movement of dancers in slow motion. Above, the Skylark tracked every transmission with steady attentiveness. Messages passed between the ships in rhythmic intervals, clear, calm, routine. There was something almost comforting about the predictability of the signals, like hearing someone breathe steadily through a quiet room. The morning sun continued its slow climb overhead. Skylark's deck warmed slightly under its touch, though the breeze kept everything cool. Sailors aboard her shielded their eyes with hands or caps as they scanned the sea. Though they couldn't see the Thresher beneath them, they imagined her descent, smooth, controlled, silent. Some even pictured her as a great silver fish gliding down to greet the undiscovered stillness of the deep. 700 meters. Down here, the water felt older, heavier with time. Not threatening, just solid, like the weight of a well-kept secret. Every meter added a new layer of soundlessness. The submarine no longer moved through water, it drifted through calm itself. The sailors remained focused, but in a peaceful way. There was no tension in the air, only professionalism wrapped in ease. The deeper they went, the more synchronized the crew seemed to become, as if the ocean's slow pulse had merged with their own rhythms. Even the simplest tasks felt meaningful. A crewman adjusting a dial did so with the care of someone tuning a violin. Another scribbled notes into a logbook with deliberate, silent strokes. Another monitored sonar, watching soft pulses sweep across the screen like waving hands in the dark. At times, the Thresher felt almost buoyant despite sinking, a paradox unique to submarines. The deeper they went, the more the interior felt suspended, floating on currents of shared trust. The presence of 129 lives, breathing, working, resting, formed a silent harmony. 800 meters. If the ocean had a heartbeat, this would be close to hearing it. The submarine's hull gently vibrated with the surrounding pressure. Not alarmingly, just enough to remind everyone that they were guests in the grand, quiet halls of the deep. And yet the Thresher remained steady. Her systems hummed with a kind of mechanical confidence. Her instruments glowed faithfully. The crew continued with their checks and updates, all in calm, low voices that matched the sleep-inducing stillness around them. Above, Skylark continued floating like a loyal lantern on the surface. Radio operators listened for the next transmission, sipping slowly from mugs that warmed their hands. The day remained quiet, the waves soft, the mood steady, almost contemplative. The ocean below them felt like another universe entirely, and yet, through thin cables and gentle signals, the two vessels stayed connected. 900 meters. This depth wrapped around the submarine like a dream. There was something beautiful about imagining the Thresher drifting through darkness that had never been disturbed by sunlight. It felt sacred in a way, like the submarine was exploring a world untouched and ancient. Inside, time seemed to slow. Movements grew gentler. Thoughts softened. The gentle sway of the submarine made every action feel like part of a natural rhythm. Breathe, check, adjust, breathe, repeat. Even the air felt calmer, warmer, carrying the quiet energy of shared focus. The sailors trusted their vessel, trusted each other, trusted the ocean's steady cradle, and for this moment, for this deepening descent, everything felt aligned. 1,000 meters. A remarkable depth, though for Thresher, still part of the familiar journey. The ocean around her was now a world of complete stillness. No currents, no disturbances, just endless quiet. The pressure outside was immense, yes, but inside, the glow of the lights and the softness of the hum made it feel as though the submarine floated through a dream. Communication with Skylark continued in reliable intervals. Calm voices, clear signals. Nothing unusual, just the gentle continuation of a planned descent. The kind of communication that felt like two friends reassuring each other. All good here. You too? Wonderful. Above, the surface sparkled under late morning light. Skylark's crew moved about with quiet confidence, trusting the Thresher's crew the same way the Thresher's crew trusted them. The sea between them wasn't a barrier, it was a bond. 1,100 meters. The sailors inside the submarine felt a deep, almost meditative focus. Everything around them, every gauge, every soft vibration, every warm glow, felt part of a serene mosaic. The Thresher continued descending with a grace that felt almost organic, like a creature exploring its natural home. And through all of it, the mood never broke, never rushed, never strained. Just a quiet continuation of a journey into deeper calm. Each man aboard felt it, the sense of being held by the sea, supported by its ancient stillness. The submarine wasn't falling. It was floating downward, as if gently guided by unseen hands. In this moment, the world above and below existed in perfect harmony. A calm ship on the surface, a calm submarine in the deep, and an even calmer ocean cradling them both. The descent continued, softly, steadily, and the morning of April 9th unfolded in slow, peaceful breaths. The fading echo There are moments in life, quiet, delicate moments, where sound doesn't simply stop, it softens, stretches, drifts. Moments where a voice fades, not abruptly, but gracefully, like a lantern dimming at the end of a long night. The morning of April 9th carried one of those moments, layered in calm waters and wrapped in the gentle hush of the sea. Far beneath the Skylark, the USS Thresher had continued her descent with the same steady rhythm she'd shown all morning. Everything about that dive had been unhurried, serene, almost meditative. The ocean had welcomed her like a patient host, offering a corridor of stillness for the submarine to move through. But now something subtle shifted. Not dramatic, not alarming, just a small ripple in the texture of the day's tranquility. It began with the faintest change in the tone of a transmission, a message, slightly slower than the ones before it. A whisper carried upward through cold water and pressure, brushing the surface air where Skylark floated quietly. The communication officer aboard Skylark leaned toward the receiver, not in panic but in focus, the same way someone leans in to hear the final notes of a lullaby. The voice from below was still steady, still calm, still entirely human, just softer, as though traveling from farther away than before. The crew on Skylark exchanged small glances, not of worry but of recognition. They knew the ocean sometimes played tricks with sound. Sometimes it bent signals, stretched them, wrapped them in invisible layers of blue. So they listened more carefully, allowing the soft underwater echo to rise at its own pace. Below, inside the Thresher, the atmosphere remained gentle. The submarine's hum continued, warm and steady. The movements of the crew were measured, unhurried, their voices a quiet chorus drifting through narrow corridors. Even the lights maintained their golden calm, casting soft halos on the metal walls. Everything felt familiar, predictable, and wrapped in routine. And yet, that next transmission surfaced with a slightly thinner thread of clarity. Not broken, not distorted, just distant. The kind of distance you hear when someone is walking slowly down a hallway while speaking, still there, still present, but stepping gently away from your immediate reach. A soft shift in proximity. Skylark's operator leaned forward again, pressing one ear to the crisp metal edge of the receiver, letting the rhythm of the ocean settle around him. He repeated a confirmation call, calm, steady, professional. The silence after his words wasn't heavy. It was simply patient, like the ocean waiting for its own echo to return. And then the Thresher's voice rose again. This time a little thinner, a little more wrapped in water, a little more like a memory speaking through a dream, but still calm, still composed. Inside the submarine, the sailors continued their steady tasks. Instruments glowed as they always had. The hum of the systems remained a gentle constant. The atmosphere was one of focused tranquility, the kind that settles in during long operations where everyone trusts the rhythm around them. There was no rush, no sharpness, only smooth continuity. But as the next message ascended through the deep, the surrounding sea stretched it like soft clay, pulling at the edges of the sound. When it reached Skylark, the words carried a faint tremble, not of fear, not of urgency, but of distance. Pure, physical distance, a reminder of just how far below the Thresher now traveled. The crew aboard Skylark listened intently. Another pause, another ripple of waiting, another gentle call sent downward,
like tapping lightly on a quiet door, and from the deep, a reply surfaced. The voice, though faint, carried the same professionalism, the same calm tone, the same unshaken clarity of trained sailors accustomed to the ocean's moods. But now it sounded as though it was traveling through long hallways of water, hallways that muffled each syllable into soft-edged echoes. Then came the words that would later echo in history. Attempting to blow. They didn't arrive sharply, they didn't rise in alarm, they drifted upward like a soft exhale carried gently through the deep. Even the phrasing felt slow, like a whisper brushing against the walls of the ocean on its way to the surface. On Skylark's deck, the operator repeated the words softly under his breath, not in shock, not in distress, but simply to confirm them, as any careful communicator would. A murmur, barely audible, lost quickly to the rolling breeze. And then, a silence. Not a silence filled with dread. Not a silence that crashed suddenly, like a door slamming. Just quiet. A quiet shaped by distance. A quiet shaped by depth. A quiet shaped by the ocean itself, settling back into its ancient stillness. The Skylark crew waited, ears open, eyes steady on the horizon. No one rushed, no one panicked. The moment was too soft, too gentle for harsh responses. They knew the ocean sometimes took a moment before carrying sound back upward. So they waited with the patience the sea demanded. Inside the Thresher, the lights still glowed. The hum still vibrated softly. The crew still moved through their calm, practiced motions. No chaos, no disorder, only the steady discipline and unity of 129 sailors working as one inside a vessel that felt like an iron cradle drifting through timeless quiet. The next transmission Skylark awaited did not come immediately. The ocean held its breath, or perhaps simply continued breathing in a rhythm too slow for human perception. The water above the Thresher thickened the path that sound would take. The deeper you travel, the more patient communication must become. So Skylark listened. The sea rolled softly around her hull. Waves bumped gently against her sides. The sky above remained pale and peaceful. It wasn't a dramatic silence. It wasn't a frightening silence. It was simply the ocean returning to its default state. Quiet, slow, ancient. A quiet so deep it felt like velvet pressed against the ears. A quiet that didn't feel empty, but full of the weight of water, of time, of all the stories the sea had witnessed. The sailors aboard Skylark stood still for a long moment, allowing the hush to settle. Some glanced again at the comms panel, others out across the open water. But the atmosphere remained steady, calm, respectful. And below them, somewhere in the vast, silent blue, the Thresher drifted in a realm the surface world could not see or hear. The silence between the two vessels stretched and stretched and stretched. Not tense, just quiet, just deep, just there. The kind of silence only the ocean can create. A silence that holds everything and says nothing. Silence, when it comes in the deep ocean, does not arrive abruptly. It settles. It pours gently into every space like soft blue sand. And on that morning,
after Thresher's last whispered message drifted upward through the water, attempting to blow. The silence that followed was exactly that kind of silence, gradual, deep, and soothing in a way only the sea could create. Aboard the Skylark, the crew continued listening, their posture calm, their breathing steady. They leaned slightly toward the equipment, as one does when listening for a faint sound in another room. But there was no urgency in their movement, only intention, patience. The quiet professionalism of sailors who understood that the ocean often speaks slowly. The receiver offered nothing at first, just a faint wash of static shaped by the currents beneath them. It wasn't unsettling static, not harsh or sharp. It was almost soft, like the distant rustle of fabric, like listening to the sea press its body gently against the hull of the ship. And then, nothing more. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand interpretation. The kind that simply exists. The communication officer sat back slowly, his fingers still resting near the switches. Not frozen, not worried. Simply waiting. Because in the world of undersea communication, pauses were not unusual. The sea was unpredictable with its echoes. Sometimes a message raced upward effortlessly. Sometimes it meandered lazily through layers of salt and shadow. The bridge of the Skylark remained peaceful. The morning light had softened into a warm glow across the deck, brushing everything with a calm gold that seemed to match the stillness of the ocean below. Sailors stood with quiet patience, their eyes shifting between the horizon and the comms panel. They waited for the next message. The ocean continued holding its breath, and the moment stretched gently onward. Down below, far below, Thresher floated in a world where sound moved differently. The deeper one travels, the more the water absorbs each vibration, each word, each echo. Messages don't simply disappear. They dissolve gradually, fading into the vastness, like chalk dust on a board, wiped clean by time. Whatever the submarine was experiencing inside her hull at that moment was wrapped entirely in the calm professionalism of her crew. Lights still glowed, instruments still hummed. The environment inside her remained warm, familiar, routine. A small, secure world drifting through immense quiet. But from the surface, that quiet felt like a curtain being slowly drawn. A pause was normal. A gentle lapse was expected. And so the Skylark continued to listen. One sailor aboard Skylark stepped out briefly onto the deck, taking in the steady horizon. The sea looked like polished glass, rippling only with the soft rhythm of its own breathing. The air smelled of salt and distant winds, but the morning breeze had settled into something gentler, something almost reflective. The ocean didn't seem troubled, it didn't seem restless. It felt thoughtful, almost as though it understood the softness of the moment better than anyone else. Back inside, the communication officer repeated a calm hail. His voice, steady and low, drifted into the microphone the way one might speak into a quiet room where someone may or may not be awake. Again, the response was silence, but not empty silence, a full silence. A silence that carried weight, like the ocean had gently swallowed the sound and was rolling it around thoughtfully before deciding whether to send anything back. Minutes passed like slow-moving waves, each one stretching time a little longer, smoothing its edges. The Skylark floated on. The ocean breathed. The world remained calm,
As the stillness deepened, some of the crew found themselves gazing out over the water, imagining Thresher's position far below. Steady, silent, enveloped by layers of blue so thick they might as well be velvet. Others watched the comms panel with loyal attention, their expressions not anxious but contemplative, mirroring the sea. For a long stretch, no new sound rose from the depths, and yet nothing felt wrong. It felt as though the ocean had simply resumed its natural rhythm, reclaiming the silence that was always its default song. If the sea could speak, it might have said, "Hush now, just listen." The crew listened. The wind softened. The sea settled. Above everything, the sky remained a gentle pale blue, like a ceiling painted in watercolors. In these moments, time didn't rush, it drifted. Minutes stretched into a calm, unbroken flow. Each breath felt slow and full. Some of the Skylark's sailors closed their eyes briefly, letting the ocean's rhythm guide their thoughts. Others stood motionless, feeling the subtle sway of the ship beneath their boots. The world felt suspended, not in fear, but in peace. Even the equipment seemed to embrace the silence. Dials stayed steady, lights glowed softly. The communications panel waited with patient stillness, like a calm messenger taking a quiet rest. And beneath it all, the faint hum of the ship continued, warm and grounding. If someone had stepped back and looked at the Skylark from a distance, they might have thought she resembled a lone candle floating gently on a sea of blue, unmoving but very much alive, quiet but full of purpose. Still, no new transmission came. The silence deepened, rippling outward across the ocean's surface, down into its layered depths, and finally settling into a place where words were no longer needed. It wasn't a silence of loss. It wasn't a silence of fear. It was simply the sea reclaiming its quiet, a quiet too old to question, too deep to resist, too gentle to disturb. And the Skylark remained there, floating in that profound softness, listening with respect to the silence that followed the last fading echo of the Thresher's calm voice. A silence that wasn't empty at all, but filled with the weight and wonder of the deep. Beneath 2,500 meters of quiet, the ocean has a way of holding stories, patiently, quietly, waiting for the right moment to let their edges soften. And in the months that followed the Thresher's final message, the sea settled into a stillness so deep and vast that it felt as though time itself had slowed to match its rhythm. When the Skylark returned to shore and the initial urgency faded into an ache of unanswered questions, the search began. Not a frantic search, but a careful, deliberate one, guided by respect, by curiosity, and by the quiet desire to understand what the deep might reveal. Ships, sonar, and minds all worked together, forming a kind of floating vigil that stretched across the surface of the Atlantic. Yet even in those early days, no one expected the ocean to give up its secrets quickly. The deep sea is not stubborn. It is simply ancient. It moves in millennia, not moments, and the world above must learn to wait with the same patience. The search teams understood this instinctively, and so they waited, and they listened, and they learned to move with the ocean instead of against it. While ships glided across the surface, the sea below remained a place of profound calm. At 2,500 meters, sunlight does not reach.
Noise barely exists. The world becomes a cathedral of blue-black stillness, filled not with fear but with the quiet dignity of a realm untouched by chaos. It is a place where time feels circular, where movement is slow and purposeful, and where even the faintest disturbance settles gently into stillness. It is here, far below the waves, that traces of the Thresher would eventually be found. But not all at once, not dramatically, not in ways that disturbed the peaceful world she had entered. Instead, small hints began to appear over months of searching. Sonar returned faint whispers, tiny reflections from the seafloor, like soft knocks against an ancient door. These signals were not sharp or urgent. They were little impressions, like footprints pressed into deep sand. When vessels equipped with the technology of the time finally sent cameras downward, the images that returned were dim, grainy, and filtered through the hush of unimaginable pressure. The first objects they recognized were small, gentle reminders rather than revelations. Pieces of metal resting quietly among the sediment. Fragments touched not by violence but by the ocean's patient, steady embrace. These weren't loud discoveries. They weren't moments of shock. They were moments of acknowledgement. The sea had welcomed the Thresher into its stillness, and now, piece by quiet piece, it was showing where she rested. And in this act, there was no dread, only reverence. Divers could not go anywhere near such depths, of course. Human lungs, human hearts, human bodies are built for the world above the waves. But machines could visit, slowly, carefully, returning images that felt as though they had been dipped in the soft glow of memory, rather than the harsh glare of analysis. Each small piece the cameras captured seemed to sit gently on the seabed, as if cradled by the sand. There was no chaos in the pictures, no disturbance, just the deep ocean holding remnants of human creation with the same serenity. It held ancient stones, forgotten shipwrecks, and drifting sea creatures that glowed faintly in the dark. And though the discoveries were technical in nature, the emotion behind them was entirely human. For many involved in the search, this wasn't simply about finding answers. It was about honoring the 129 souls who had served with courage and unity. It was about acknowledging their journey, one that extended far beneath the waves. It was about allowing memory to settle gently into truth. Families, sailors, engineers, and all who had been touched by the Thresher's story found themselves imagining the ocean not as a place of loss, but as a vast sanctuary, a silent resting place where nothing hurts, nothing rushes, nothing disturbs. In letters and conversations, some described the deep not as frightening but as peaceful, a place where the sea holds them safely. These were quiet reflections, whispered in living rooms, spoken during evening walks, or murmured as people looked out across the water and watched the light shift gently across the waves. The idea comforted many that beneath 2,500 meters of water, the Thresher lay surrounded by stillness. No storm could reach her, no noise could trouble her. No chaos from the world above could disturb that realm of endless calm. The ocean, in its ancient wisdom, had become a guardian. And so, as the search continued over the next months, the tone never shifted into despair or tension. It remained steady, thoughtful, and above all respectful. The teams worked with the quiet concentration of people tending to something sacred. Every new discovery, no matter how small, was treated with a sense of gravity wrapped in gentleness. Nothing was sensationalized. Nothing was rushed. The findings were simply acknowledged, recorded, and understood as part of a larger truth that the sea had decided to share, little by little. There was a deeply human element in this unfolding process. The recognition of bravery, the honoring of service, the quiet acceptance of mystery. The Thresher's story did not end in chaos. It settled, it rested, it became part of the deep's eternal calm. And in that calm, people found a strangely soothing thought that sometimes stories do not shout their conclusions. They whisper them gently through layers of time and water. The ocean never gave everything back, but what it did reveal was enough to offer understanding. And what it kept was held in peace. Beneath 2,500 meters of quiet, the Thresher's presence became part of the deep's infinite lullaby, a soft reminder of courage, commitment, and the silent strength that human beings carry into the unknown. In the months that followed, the search slowly evolved from an operation into a meditation, a long, gentle dialogue between humanity and the sea. Ships came and went, equipment was lowered and raised, reports were written and rewritten, yet through it all, the rhythm remained wonderfully slow, like the measured breathing of someone drifting into deep sleep. Nothing about the process was chaotic. The ocean does not rush, and it seemed to encourage the world above to match its pace. The search crews found themselves adjusting, almost naturally, to this quieter tempo. Each day became a cycle of listening, scanning, waiting, interpreting, and then listening again. It was a ritual, soft in tone, steady in purpose. Some days the sonar returned faint hints, tiny echoes brushing against the receivers like fingertips tapping lightly on a wooden table. Other days there was only the gentle hum of the equipment, the soft rocking of the ship, and the open stillness of the water stretching to every horizon. But even on those quiet days, no one felt discouraged. The ocean had no obligation to reveal its secrets. The fact that it had offered even small glimpses was treated as an act of quiet generosity. Weeks turned into months, and gradually, more fragments were recorded. Not dramatic pieces, not overwhelming discoveries, just small, simple remnants, resting calmly on the seabed. Each one lay in a posture of peace, touched by silt and softened by time. If you looked at the images, you might almost believe the ocean had arranged them gently, like artifacts placed carefully in a silent museum where no footsteps echo and no voices disturb the stillness. With every discovery, the tone aboard the search ships shifted a little, not toward sadness, but toward reverence. The Thresher was no longer just a vessel that had vanished into the deep. She had become a symbol, a memory held in the vast quiet under 2,500 meters of water, a reminder of courage and dedication, of 129 individuals who stepped forward into the unknown with unity and purpose. And the deep, rather than being feared, became something sacred. Many people involved in the effort reflected privately on this. They spoke of how unusual it felt to search for something in a place so peaceful.
The depths were not a realm of darkness and danger. They were calm, almost meditative. Some imagined the Thresher resting there like a sleeping giant embraced by the ancient seabed. Others thought of the deep as a cradle, quiet, unmoving, timeless. This imagery helped families too. When loved ones received updates, spoken gently, written thoughtfully, the emphasis was never on loss, never on tragedy. Instead, it was on stillness, on peace, on the sense that beneath the immense pressure of the deep, the ocean had created a sanctuary, untouched by storms or struggle. Some families would stand at the shore during sunset, watching how the sky met the sea. In those moments, many described feeling as though the water was breathing with them, slow, steady, full of memory. The idea brought comfort that the ocean, in its ancient wisdom, remembered the Thresher and her crew not with violence, but with dignity. In time, the search shifted from discovering what happened to understanding how to prevent such loss again. But even then, the Thresher remained present in the hearts of those who served, her story a quiet North Star, guiding future safety and care. And still, beneath 2,500 meters of water, she rested in silence, not forgotten, not abandoned, held. There is something profoundly human about this part of the story. Not the machinery, not the operations, but the response. People gathered, they remembered, they honored, they took what they learned and used it to protect others. This is the gentle legacy of the Thresher. Not sorrow, but strength. Not despair, but dedication. As months passed, the ocean returned fully to its natural rhythm. The ripples of ships searching faded, the seabed settled, the currents resumed their ancient paths, and once again the deep became the same serene, undisturbed world it had always been. A world where time seems to stretch out forever, where nothing rushes, where every grain of sand moves in a dance, slow enough to feel eternal. If one could descend to that depth, the silence would be unlike anything on land. It would not be empty silence, but full silence, filled with the quiet presence of the deep, the pressure of ages, the soft glow of distant bioluminescent creatures drifting like stars in an underwater night sky. There, in that sacred calm, the Thresher rests, not as a wreck, not as a relic, but as part of the ocean's grand mosaic, a piece of human history woven gently into the fabric of the deep. And perhaps that is where the story finds its most peaceful truth, that some journeys do not end abruptly. They dissolve softly into the quietest corners of the world, where memory becomes part of the landscape, and courage becomes part of the tide. Above, the waves continue their endless conversation with the wind. Below, the deep holds its serene silence. And within that silence, the Thresher's legacy endures. Calm, steady, eternal. The legacy that rose from quiet waters. Legacies are curious things. They do not always rise from glory or triumph. Sometimes they rise from silence, from the deep, unbroken stillness of a moment that changes the way people think, act, and care. The USS Thresher, resting beneath 2,500 meters of ocean calm, became the quiet beginning of something far-reaching, something that would touch generations of sailors who would never meet her crew,
but who would feel the protection born from their memory. And like all things shaped by the sea, this legacy emerged slowly, gently, but with a strength that would endure for decades. After the Thresher's loss, engineers, officers, sailors, and leaders across the Navy found themselves reflecting, not with anger, not with blame, but with a deep desire to understand. The ocean, vast and ancient, had reminded them of its power, and in return they sought to honor the 129 souls by ensuring their service would lead to a safer future for those who followed. What came next was not a policy, not a slogan, not a simple adjustment. It was a transformation, a quiet, steady, carefully constructed transformation. One brick laid after another, one detail examined after the next, until the foundation of modern submarine safety was born. That foundation would one day be known as SUBSAFE. The creation of SubSafe was not loud or dramatic. There were no heated speeches, no fiery announcements. Instead, it arrived the way a sunrise does, slowly, then suddenly becoming everything. Engineers studied every detail of submarine design: valves, joints, piping systems, welds, materials, quality control, testing procedures. Nothing was too small to examine, too minor to question. But the tone of this work was not frantic. It was respectful, deliberate, patient. Much like the search that followed Thresher's disappearance, the creation of SubSafe was shaped by care, a gentle determination to ensure that no submarine would be sent into the ocean without being cradled by the highest level of safety human hands could build. Imagine a long, quiet room filled with blueprints and sketches, with engineers murmuring softly as they traced lines and symbols. Imagine the steady hum of machines being tested in controlled environments, the soft whir of equipment calibrating, the calm voices of inspectors verifying every weld, every bolt, every seal. SubSafe became the guardian the Thresher never had, a guardian for all submarines that came after her. What made SubSafe remarkable was not just its thoroughness, but its tenderness, the almost artistic attention to detail. There was something profoundly human in the way its creators approached the work. They understood that beneath every submarine hull were lives, families, futures, stories not yet written. So SubSafe became a set of rules, yes, but also a promise carved from care. It focused on two things: survivability and recovery. If a submarine ever faced difficulty, its crew would have every possible chance to return safely. Systems would hold, valves would work, structures would endure, emergency procedures would be supported by equipment designed and tested to withstand the unyielding depths. Thousands of pages of documentation were written. Tests were performed again and again, not to chase perfection, but to ensure reliability. SubSafe was built on the idea that no detail was too small to matter, because in the deep ocean, even small things carry great weight. And slowly, steadily, submarine by submarine, the legacy of the Thresher began shaping an entire generation of vessels. As years passed, sailors who joined new submarine crews may not have known every line of SubSafe's protocols. They may not have memorized every test requirement or every point of inspection. But they felt the program's presence in the quiet assurance of their training. the confidence of their equipment, the professionalism of every shipyard worker who touched their vessel. Many submariners described it as a sense of being held, a feeling that the ship around them was crafted with such care, that the ocean itself seemed a little less vast, a little less unpredictable. And this wasn't forced optimism, it was earned trust. Since the creation of SubSafe, every certified submarine has carried a safety record that speaks in calm, steady numbers. No SubSafe certified submarine has ever been lost. Not one. The legacy of the Thresher became a shield, quiet, effective, unwavering. Thousands of sailors served beneath the waves, surfacing again and again to reunite with families, to share meals, to return to normal life, all because one program born from reflection kept them safe. If legacies can be measured in lives protected, then the Thresher's legacy is immeasurable. With time, the SubSafe program did more than strengthen submarine safety. It reshaped the culture around naval engineering itself. The program became a model of thoroughness, precision, and humility. An acknowledgement that humans, even with all their ingenuity, must approach the deep with respect. Submarines that came after Thresher were built not just stronger, but wiser. Every valve was a statement of care. Every inspection was an echo of remembrance. Every test was a soft tribute to the 129 who had journeyed before. New generations of sailors entered submarines that felt different, not just in design, but in spirit. These vessels carried with them a kind of quiet confidence, almost like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. A confidence that came not from arrogance, but from attentiveness, from lessons learned through patience, reflection, and dedication. And though the Thresher rests far below, she remains present in every submarine that carries a SubSafe certification. Her legacy flows through the pipes. It whispers in the hull. It hums in the steady vibration of safe machinery. She is there, not as a symbol of fear, but as a guardian of prevention. Honoring the Thresher's legacy has always been done gently, not with fanfare, not with speeches that echo across loud halls, but with quiet remembrance. Each year, at ceremonies held by the sea, names are spoken softly, bells are rung slowly, families gather not to relive pain, but to share pride. The mood is always reflective, peaceful, like standing at the shore during sunset and watching the light settle on the waves. They remember not a catastrophe, but a commitment. Not the ending, but the impact. Not the silence of the deep, but the voice that rose from it and changed everything. And in this way, the Thresher continues to serve. Through every safe dive, every routine patrol, every submarine that descends and rises again, because its systems are guarded by SubSafe's careful watch. Her legacy is not carved into monuments. It is woven into procedures, policies, and the everyday confidence of crews across the fleet. It is a living legacy, quiet, steady, deeply human. Though the USS Thresher never returned to the surface, her story rose higher than anyone could have imagined. It became a reminder that progress is not always forged in triumph, that sometimes the deepest advances emerge from reflection and resilience. The submarine community, from engineers to officers to new recruits, still speaks of her with a kind of reverence.
Not the somber kind, but the respectful kind. The way one speaks of pioneers who walked paths others feared to tread. The Thresher did not vanish into the deep. She transformed into a beacon, guiding every vessel that followed her toward safer horizons. And so, her legacy continues, quietly shaping the future, one careful inspection at a time, one safe journey at a time, one protected life at a time. A legacy that whispers through the steel of every submarine, just as the ocean whispers around her resting place, softly, gently, eternally. The ocean's gentle sleep. As we reach the final stretch of this quiet journey, allow yourself to settle just a little deeper into whatever supports you. Feel the weight of your shoulders gently releasing, the slow rise and fall of your breath, the soft stillness gathering around your thoughts. You've traveled far tonight, not across continents or skies, but through the hush of the ocean's deepest chambers, where time drifts slowly and memory settles like the softest sand. And now in this gentle closing chapter, we return to the image that has guided our story from the beginning, the vast, tranquil ocean holding everything in its patient embrace. Picture the sea at night, dark but not frightening, endless but not overwhelming. A wide blanket of quiet blue that seems to breathe with you. In and out, steady and calm, a rhythm older than any heartbeat on land. Beneath that surface, far below the place where waves dance and moonlight glimmers, lies a realm of stillness so deep that sound itself seems to rest. This is the space where the Thresher sleeps. Not lost, not forgotten, but resting in a kind of eternal calm. There, at more than 2,500 meters, the world is free from storms, free from noise, free from the rush of living. It is a sanctuary carved by pressure and time, yet softened by the quiet wisdom of the deep. Imagine the Thresher resting there, not as a cold machine, but as a symbol of courage and dedication, wrapped gently in the soft quiet of the ocean floor. The sands around her do not stir quickly. The water moves with the slowness of dreams. Everything sinks into peaceful equilibrium. Even the smallest echoes fade into a lullaby of stillness. And in this image, there is no fear. Only serenity, a serenity that feels almost warm, almost protective, like a soft hand placed on your back. As the ocean cradles her, let it cradle you as well. Let each thought drift away, dissolving gently like patterns in the tide. Let each breath become slower, deeper, softer. Let your mind sink into the same calm that blankets the seafloor, where nothing demands your attention and nothing interrupts your rest. The Thresher's story, though marked by silence, leaves behind a legacy of resilience and protection. But here, in this final moment, her presence becomes something even quieter, something almost poetic. She sleeps beneath the waves, in harmony with currents that have existed since before humans walked the earth. And with every calm tide that rises and falls, it is as if the ocean whispers a reminder. There is peace even in depth. There is rest even in the unknown.
There is calm waiting beneath every wave. Tonight, as you drift toward your own rest, let that truth surround you. Let the ocean's slow, steady rhythm guide your breath, in and out, soft and slower. Feel your thoughts loosening their grip. Feel your body sinking into comfort. Feel the weight of the day melting away, like sand slipping quietly through fingers. You are safe. You are held. You are drifting into a deep, quiet place, a place where noise cannot follow, where time seems to pause, where your mind can float freely, unburdened and light. Just like the Thresher rests in her peaceful corner of the ocean, allow yourself to rest in yours. Let this moment become a quiet harbor where you feel entirely at ease, washed in stillness, rocked gently by an unseen tide. And as you close your eyes, as the world softens around you, as sleep begins to gather like a warm current, let the ocean whisper one final lullaby. You are drifting into calm. You are sinking into peace. You are safe in the deep, gentle quiet. Now breathe slowly, softly, and let yourself slip into the ocean's gentle sleep.